we see editing as happening very soon in a number of different ways.
You can even use the original augment system, of course, to do the editing and then transform it into OPML.
That's right, which is how we did a lot of our documents. And so the first transformer we wrote, which Jonathan wrote, was actually an augment to OPML transformer. And so we really did write a lot of our documents. Brad wrote the architecture document that we used completely in augment, and then we exported it, and now we have it on HyperScope to play with. So that's pretty cool.
Did you have Ted seen the transducers?
Ted has not seen this yet, but the next time he's in town, he will be getting a call from us.
I've shown him around.
Oh, so okay.
I think we predate him, actually.
You know, okay, we had this whole argument at one of our dev meetings about whether to call it transclusions or inclusions. And most of the devs were like, we should call it transclusions because it's kind of a cool name. And, you know, Ted comes up with cool names. That's what he does well, right? And Doug was sort of like, well, we can call them both, but you could tell that he really wanted to stick with the inclusions. And so I was thinking to myself, no, we definitely have to call them transclusions, right? After that, I started talking to a lot of people. And I just realized, this is, again, just typical stupid things. If you call it a transclusion, no one knows what the hell you're talking about, right? Unless you're a geek. And not just a geek, you have to be a hardcore geek.
It has to be a
It is part of it, right? If you call it an inclusion, people actually understand what you're talking about. So you can talk to normal people about it. So
is really the definition of transclusion different enough to justify a new term?
no, it's the same thing.
Okay.
It is.
We were using the term include before he was using the term transclude.
That's right. And had it implemented.
And the term link.
Yeah. We implemented it for the health system. We implemented it for the health system. One of the things about the include is, for instance, to make a set of statements that say, you know, include this, include that. These can be, what's including is the entry and the telephone list of different people. So you can say, I want to go to my family, and maybe you include, but then you see all the family members. Then you see something else. That any item out there can be included in any number of those lists. And then actually, when you're looking at the include list, you can say, I want to jump to that, and you're actually jumping right to the environment in which that is from. If you edit it, and you edit it, you have to be careful.
Well, if there was a way, you have to come up with a whole new code under the 404, hasn't it?
Yeah, there are lots of issues raised when you start introducing transclusions. You have to worry about loops, you have to worry about other things. But it's a really cool capability. And the fact that we have it now, I mean, we've been brainstorming a lot of ways that we can use it. I've been using limited transclusions in some stuff that I've written previously with some other folks. And even that limited capability is useful. But now that we know about this and we have it and stuff, like we're thinking of all sorts of actual real uses for this sort of thing. So I think it is exciting. One other feature I want to...
Interesting for an argument between Ted and us, that the source code way back like this, that every node in Augment actually has a date that was last edited, the identity of the person that did it. And so you can turn on that view spec to watch those things, and the source code was a very, very helpful thing about if there's suddenly a bug in there, you start looking through there and they can see Jack is about to know anybody.
They had version control in the original Augment.
That's how we did.
And the version control...
Because we could track who, and we were all editing all at the same time. So we could track who was, who would change what line to that.
Right, right. Blame.
When you go to content filtering, it'll only show you those nodes or lines changed by a certain person.
Since a certain day.
Yeah.
Right. In case you wanted to do quality.
Just happened to be delving into a report written in 1974 today that talks about the implementation of the feature.
I have a question. You put an old document and bring it online, and it's got old view specs. What happens to those?
We tried to, in John's transformer, we tried to make do the translations of the view specs so that it all works. So far, I mean, for the files I've been playing with, it works pretty well. But I'm certain there are cases that it doesn't work. And we'll find out. I mean, this is one of the things I hope to be doing more collaboration with the Computer Vision Museum. There's a wealth of knowledge right now sitting in Augment that only a few people have access to. And it has all the archaeological information as well. It has the signatures there. It has the date stamps in there. I mean, we were reading files, and we could actually see, like, oh, Christina wrote this paper wrote this paragraph in 1982. Right? I mean, it was pretty cool. Or Harvey wrote this source code, and it was really interesting source code. So one of the things that we would love to do is simply just export all that content and make it available so people can browse it. Because there's just all this good content that's stuck in there.
I just want to throw something in, just for all the features, imagine source code in this as well.
I want to show one more feature, and then I'm going to get to the big ideas real quick about that. So the feature I want to show you is something called indirect links. So if we go to this particular paragraph of the document, that's not there. And I want to go to 2C2A. Okay.
C stands for command.
Sorry. This is not correct. Okay, what I'm going to show you, actually, I'll just do it this way. Oh. I probably do. Yes, thank you.
Question relative to that. Is there any way of getting the environment to show you what are the set of filters that are being enforced at any particular moment?
Yes. Right now there are a couple different ways to do it. Again, I've been showing you the turbo mode, but you can look at the link icon, and that will show you the different view specs. If you actually look at the browser mode and you click on view specs, it gives you some idea. Actually, it's well, it's not actually. Okay, it's not actually showing you the things right there. This is stuff that we'll work on. It needs to show you
the
the
command and augment if you want to show what the content analyzer.
Right, right. Like a little stat. We need like a status bar. There's some stuff that we need to do to make this.
What are the icons on this side?
Oh, those are zoom buttons. I will talk about that.
I know I'm jumping in.
No, that's okay.
Let's see.
That's okay. I'm intentionally actually skipping the easy features for a reason, which I'll explain shortly. Okay, so if you look at this paragraph, we've just got regular HTML links, right? 2 and 3. These are actually footnotes in the document, and if you click on one of these footnotes, for example, it will take you to the exact footnote. It works just like any HTML document. It takes you to Ref 2 right here. So one of the things about linking in general, if we know that there's a link in a paragraph that we want to view, and if we know that we want to just jump directly to the link, we can actually save time by using something called indirect linkage. So normally you would have to press the link twice. You'd have to go to the space that you're trying to get to in the first place, and then you're trying to click on the link, right, at that point. Well, I know that paragraph, which was 2CA2, had a link in it. It had 2 links in it, actually. And I know I want it to just follow that first link, so what I'm going to do is just do an indirect link. And what it does,
That's because an anarchy in the command line.
okay.
So you have to do it one.
Okay, well, it works. What it did was, it didn't take me to 2C2A, it took me to the first link in 2C2A. And you can actually do this across documents. So you can imagine having footnotes in a paper, and in the footnote you have a link to another document, right? And you say, I don't actually want to see the link, I want to actually go to the link. So you can use these indirect links. As with the view specs, you can also embed indirect links into your addresses. So you can send these addresses around, and you can do all sorts of very, very, very funky stuff based on that.
You can even have like a bookmarks file, effectively, or a link database that instead of storing it in your browser, you just store it as a normal OpenML document, and then you can refer to wherever that link refers to by name, which is effectively what a bookmark is.
And they don't have to be numbers too. All this stuff plays together, so you could be using labels on the, which usually touched on a little bit. So for example, if it's a scientific paper, the name of the branch where all the references are is references. You can say references, .in, L, go to the next one, then run it.
In your text, you see, it says in Ref 5 shows this. Well, you can jump from Ref 5 and down here, but you can also jump to Ref 5.L. We'll go down to Ref 5, keep the link there. So Ref 5 can point to some documents. So, and you can actually extend that if you want it.
Yeah, you can just keep going.
This is an excellent segue into the 5 big ideas. So these are the bigger picture sort of things that at least a subset of the bigger picture ideas that we want people to walk away from all this sort of thing. As you can see from all of us sitting down and just going on and on about all of the cool things that you can do with really a small set of just core capabilities, one of the things is when we think about how we design software is that we design software, today at least, the big emphasis is on user friendliness. Right? We've got to make software easier to use. That's really important. Well, what's interesting about that concept is that a lot of people associate that notion with Doug. And the reason they associate that notion with Doug is because Doug invented windowing systems, hypertext, and all of these other things. And so they say, hey, those are easier to use for me than DOS was, and hence, Doug must be responsible for these ideas.
You're talking about what here on?
So you can see, even when I say that sort of thing, if any of you are watching Doug, you can see Doug cringe whenever user friendliness is mentioned, because that's actually not what it's about. It's about technology for people, right? And not all people care about user friendliness. Sometimes we care about expert friendliness. We care about things that are high performance. How many people here ride bicycles? How many people here ride tricycles? Given the choice, how many of you would rather ride a tricycle than a bicycle? Okay. Right? User friendliness is important, right? And it should be available to people if they so choose, right? But you can imagine a world where we have high performance tricycles.
Although some bicycle enthusiasts might take exception to that.
Okay, well, one of the funny things about bicycles.
It's better to talk about capabilities. What level of capability you're going to obtain with some approach. When you get that, you say, well, how much is it worth getting that capability? Well, if it really costs you this much to learn it, maybe you're not interested. But if they were just, all in the early years especially, there just was some arbitrary amount of learning or something. And beyond that, it's too hard to learn. So you just, anyway.
There's some relationship between the two, right? There's overhead in learning these things, and you have to decide whether the cost of learning actually is, the benefit of learning actually outweighs the cost, right? And it's actually a really hard thing to deal with. But I think too often we err on the side of not wanting to learn about systems because we think, people don't want to do that. And in the end, we pretty much fail at that too, right? A lot of software that people try to create, which is user-friendly, I mean, my mom can't use it, right? It's the mom test, and so people really aren't doing a good job of that. And then when I use it, I'm not happy about it. So, so what benefit came from all this sort of thing? If we think about tools all the time, think about playing the violin, think about playing instruments, for example. Think about bicycles, think about all this sort of stuff. We do things every day in our lives. Think about writing, right? Think about language. That requires overhead. And we would not trade off those things for anything in the world because the capabilities that they empower us with are critical. We don't see this very often in software. If we think about a category of high-performance software, that's not something that really exists. It's not something that's really common. And it's something that we really should be thinking more about. So how do we take people and how do we empower them with capabilities, even if there's a little bit of a learning curve? And training wheels are okay, too. I learned how to ride a bike with training wheels, right? So that becomes a new design challenge, which is not necessarily how we everyone here learned how to ride a bike with training wheels, right?
My father didn't believe in training wheels.
Oh, no.
I didn't believe Mike, so I had to borrow somebody else's.
20 seconds when each one of the 3 girls before they're off riding.
See, I hate hearing that sort of thing because it makes it sound like learning how to ride a bike is easy. And it was not easy, I'm telling you. Maybe the training wheels made it harder for me to
We
learn.
can
how
talk
to-
afterwards about
Well,
this.
okay, we'll have a therapy session where we talk about it. But what we really want to do is we want to enable, we want to give people, the ability to play around things without having to be experts right off the bat. I think a great example of it is the piano. I suck at the piano. I took like 3 years of lessons. I could probably still play chopsticks in the keyboard, right? But it's crappy. Compare that to a Rubinstein or any classical or jazz pianist, right? And they're taking the same instrument and they're doing wonderful things. The great thing about it is it's accessible, right? So I can at least learn a little bit about music and I can benefit from that experience. But if I go a step further, I can really do wonderful things with that piano. And more importantly, I think the piano is an entry point for a lot of musicians to other instruments, which are far more complicated, like the violin, or like the horn, all these different things, right? We want those kind of equivalents in our software today. I think that's really critical. And this is one of the big ideas that we want people to walk away from with this kind of stuff.
Well, there's a strong connection with the vocabulary you learn. And so if you can just keep extending your vocabulary to give you more and more power to express things. That's the way augmented vocabulary was. So beginners can start out with very simple vocabularies. You just add it like to that vocabulary.
Right. Right. So language is another example, right? Like a 3-year-old baby can talk, and they don't talk well, but they can talk, and you can pretty much understand what they're talking about, And so you can design your software to same things. I have, a 3-year-old version of the language, but then gradually learn and become more capable of spreading yourself.
I think there's also a concept of getting motivation in there somewhere, because I remember in the early days, I have a bunch of physicist friends, and I would go over and I'd say, you guys ought to try this internet stuff, it's really great, you can send an email and everything, and they'd go, why would we want to do that, and they go back to whatever they were doing in their calculators or whatever. Then years later, they came to me and said, you ought to see this internet stuff, and I told you that 20 years ago. But there's something, you usually don't learn something unless you have some motivation to it, there's something in it you want to do. So I think you have to sell a little bit what it can do as well as how to do it.
Or if you feel like everyone else is moving forward and moving like that.
That's
Well, there's
change
that,
is a
and then
good
there's
idea.
also, sometimes there's something missing, like in their case, there was no mathematical notation. So they thought, this is dumb because it can't do anything I wanted to do. But once it could do what they wanted it to do, that was a whole different ballgame.
Right.
So there's all that kind of give and take.
The onus on us as a community is to learn how to communicate that and to identify the motivations, right? This is not just about putting a piece of software out there and letting other people figure it out. It's about understanding what people want to do. And that's really our next big challenge, right? It's been challenging.
I'd like to bring up the term of what augmentation means, like in the whole thing about, to get a conceptual framework about how we are augmented. And then if you go back to look at all of the different artifacts and things that have been introduced into our culture through the years, and each one, how many new changes and skills and practices and methods that go like this. And so this augmentation system is something we need to learn how to study, because it gets very awkward. Screwed up, it's but the whole thing is something that it just needs to be sort of a science thing oriented about that.
I'm going to come back to that at the end, actually, because I think that's a really important point. So real quickly, these actually are much easier. This one is a little long, actually. Addressability is for more than linking. This was actually a lesson that Doug really had to pound into all of us, and that we understood it as a feature, but we really didn't get it until about halfway through the project. We know, we're smarter than we think. With the documents and the containers that we're working all the time, we know a lot about the structure. And if we know something about the structure, then we should be able to take advantage of that structure. So an easy example of that is a dictionary. Right? If I asked any of you to look up link in the dictionary, what would you do? Well, you know that a dictionary is organized alphabetically, right? And so you're going to say, well, I'm going to go somewhere in the middle, because L is somewhere in the middle. And if I hit M, I have to go somewhere previously. And if I hit C, then I have to go somewhere later, right? We're taking advantage of our documents. If you ask, for those of you here who are Christian, right? And if I ask you to look up John 3:16, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And you can go and you can look that up and you can find exactly what you're looking for. What you will find once you have this sort of notion in your head is that, yeah, we actually know the documents that we work with a lot more than we think we know. And if we know the structure of our documents and if we know where we want to go, I would like to just get there really quickly, as opposed to doing what we normally have to do with software, which is, okay, I know it's sort of at the end, so I'm going to scroll around in the end and figure things out from there, right? And so this is actually related to the third point, which is that latency matters. The difference between me saying jump to item, go to the fourth section of the document versus scrolling around trying to find exactly what I want, maybe it's like, a second versus 4 seconds. And maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. It's something that we're doing all the time, and latency is really important, especially when we're talking about expert interfaces. The ability to use an address for something other than saying, hey, go take a look at it, for doing things like jumping around in navigation is actually a really, really, really useful skill. It's one of the things that I certainly just, I'd heard this before, I'd heard Doug talking about this before, and I didn't really get until I actually started using the system firsthand. And now I find myself doing it all the time, and wishing I had that capability in my other editors that I'm using. So it is very valuable from that regard. The other thing to keep in mind, and it's related to this, I took this document many years ago. It was about 6 years ago. I took this 1962 paper, and basically there was this guy in Germany, Michael Friedwald, who scanned in the document. The document was written pre-augment, right? So it's not electronic anywhere. So he scanned it in.
Pre-word processor of any kind.
Pre-word processor. So typewritten? Typewriter? Okay, so it was written on a typewriter. So no digital version.
Originally handwritten,
Probably.
on the typewriter.
So no digital version of the software, of the article. And so he scanned it in, and he sat down and he said, okay, well, you know what I want to do with this document? I would like to break up the document into sections, because I don't want people to actually have to click on each section to click on the whole document and have to scroll around. So he broke up the document into several HTML documents, right? And then he said, well, one of the things people find really handy is a table of contents. So I'm going to create another document, and it's going to be a table of contents, and it's going to be a link to all of these sections. He basically figured all of these things out, and he went and he generated a lot of static HTML documents. Well, if this story sounds familiar to you, it should, because it is. It's something that we do all the time when we're taking our documents. We're saying, oh, these are views that we want to be able to do, and because web browsers are stupid, either I have to write some custom software that will automatically generate the views I want, or I go and I generate static HTML documents and link between them and all these different things. And it takes a lot of time. It's a pain in the ass, and you don't always necessarily get the view that you want. Right? Views are an essential, basic capability that we should have in all of our different systems. What's great, what's so interesting about this 1962 paper, so I was taking the XML that it's like 6 years ago, taking the HTML and converting it into XML. And so converting that XML to OPML was super easy, and so I was doing it. And I was just browsing around, and I was just reading this paper again. And first of all, it's much easier to read this paper when you have these capabilities. And then second of all, I was just marveling at the fact that just by converting this one document into OPML, I could do all the things that this other guy had probably labored for days, just getting it right and doing this sort of thing. And not only can I do it with this document, I can do it with any of my documents. Right? So, this issue about what addressability and using your address and all these different things is important. I talked about latency already. I talked about interoperability. Just to skip to the very end, this is the beginning. We released HyperScope 1.0. We're really happy about it. We think the software is pretty cool. We want everyone to go out and play with it. But it's just the beginning. Some of the things to keep in mind about this software. Number one, I mentioned that we intentionally decided not to innovate. That was one of our design principles here. There are people who are going around and who are going to look at the software and are going to say, you know what, this was a really stupid way to do it. We can do things much, much better. You know what? If you can think of a better way to do it, then do it. This is open source. Our community is open. We want to see it happen. And if you do it, tell us about it. And tell us about the learning, right? And let's share this all amongst each other. Right? That's going to help us evolve all these different things. We're not religious about all this stuff. We want to expose a few capabilities, and then we want to start the evolution process. However, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't just assume by skimming over the software and by looking over a feature list, as some folks in the blogosphere have done, who I won't mention, that you know exactly, oh, well, that obviously is a stupid feature. Maybe you're right, but you know what? Give it a shot. Try working with it for a little bit and see what you think and see if you really understand the value of it. And then afterwards you can tell us that it's a stupid feature and here's why.
And it really is important that until you use it quite a bit, you really have a working workshop. Then it's very easy before that to misjudge the utility of something or how it got to be. And we had, how many hundreds of users do you think we had? Many, many all over the country. And so we were really cultivating that evolution. And so it's all too easy to be hasty about fixing something.
And
the other
that's
thing
well,
I just wanted to mention is that because there's a lot of different features, and if you look at each feature individually, you could say, well, I can click on that, or I can click on that. The real power behind this, not to say that each individual feature is not powerful, but when they're combined together, like jump and change the least break at the same time, or whatever, the kinds of things that you can be able to do when you add editing into this, to be able to edit across windows without even looking at where you're editing, you can, because you can address something and have something inserted someplace. And all these things tie together and how it works in combination, and there's no way to know that without, really using it.
right, without experiencing it.
Yeah, I just wanted to relate my own personal experience. I know when I first started using Augment, I thought there were all these features that I thought were esoteric, and I was like, I'm not going to need that. And I was kind of judging the software a little bit. And then as I used it more and more and more, each one of these features I used to think was esoteric. I started depending on more and more some of the view spec letters, and just how things were sort of constructed. And now it's really like you have to pry them from my fingers. It's like, it's interesting, I've changed how I work, and now I like to work with documents in a hierarchical way, and I sort of zoom through them. And that's been a really cool process of coming to respect the feature set and sort of how to implement it.
And I would like to say, this is the only project I worked on since 1978 is when I first came into the group, that we were saying, a lot of times in the design meetings, we were saying, oh, well, we don't need to do all those things. We could just do a few of those
It's
things.
been the opposite.
And these guys were like, no, we need all of these things.
We need content.
It's the only time we ever had.
Yeah,
it was pretty amazing.
We need the command bar.
Right.
You guys were okay.
You're like, no,
sort of
no,
like
you
the
can just have
overlay,
some
like,
buttons.
Well, I think the point you made earlier is something that we want, which is there needs to be a tool for experts, right? And there needs to be a tool for novices, and one doesn't satisfy the needs, and we need a tool.
So I like that the novice one has got just stage and stage, smoothly evolving into the expert.
Yeah.
So that's the way, as people's vocabulary goes, you move into, say, some office place where everybody's working on a really different domain, really different vocabulary, but your basic one's the same. And you just start adding and learning that. And it's the large-scale evolution. I talk about the big strategy has to go on as this thing evolves really on out, is how best can we facilitate the concurrent evolution of all the different aspects of that. And, so it's so easy, otherwise, if you can use prematurely set up policies about how something should be. So,
Providing that smooth migration path is something that we tried to